Hello, everybody, and good morning, and welcome to this very, very special episode of Inside Insights, a podcast powered by Zappi. Today is a great episode because we are here to talk to y'all about Super Bowl advertising. I'm very excited for this conversation. This is the kickoff of our 6th season. We're going to be talking about a lot of advertising this season, and I'm joined by some friends, and I'm very excited to talk about what they think about the ads from last night, but also what American consumers thought about the ads last night. So joining me are Faris and Rosie Yakob and Kim Malcolm. These three people know more about advertising than most people I've ever met. So I'm very, very excited to talk to them and unpack some of the ads. And we're going to be using consumer data as a backdrop to our discussion. We're going to highlight the top 10 ads according to US consumers, also some of our favorites. We're also going to pick on some that we thought maybe missed the mark or could have done a better job. And through that, we'll unpack a few of the trends that we saw and maybe things that were missed overall. So first and foremost, let's get this party started. And thank you all for joining live. I'm hoping this thing is working because Kelsey and I fumbled our way through a test on Monday, but we made it, or on Friday rather. So let's go around the table and just get some initial reactions. I'll go first so I can get out of the way. I thought, so first of all, I'm the only person on this podcast who I think was also watching for the game. I'd be remiss not to say congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs, and their fans. And you were rooting for the Chiefs as well, Faris?
We were.
Oh, good. I was too.
Okay,
although
great.
I was at an Eagles household and I felt really bad for him. Him and his son were gutted at the end of the episode, at the end of the Super Bowl. And it was not a good time for them. So my son and I left very quickly, but congratulations to the people of Kansas City. It was a great Super Bowl, great advertising. My thoughts overall were, I thought there was a massive, as usual, usage of celebrities.
Yeah.
And there was very inconsistent executions of the celebrities. So just because you spend a bunch of money to get a celebrity does not guarantee you're going to build your brand and does not guarantee you're going to do great ads. And so I think when we talk about the data, you see a lot of that come through. But I don't know, maybe it was just recency bias, but I felt like this Super Bowl more than ever was celebrity heavy on a lot. And I know that there was some ads that stayed away from that. I think they did a good job. But within the actual usage of celebrities, I thought some of them did a really good job and some of them were a big miss, which we could talk about a little later, unless anybody wants to jump in and react.
Well, I want to react to that too, which is just, it was a more is more celebrity year. So I feel like in the past, maybe we saw some ads with a celebrity, but T-Mobile is like, let's have 5. Even Pepsi was like, we're going to have Ben Stiller and Steve Martin, 2 giant names in comedy. So it felt like we weren't just seeing those one-offs. We were also seeing kind of, Dunkin' Donuts, Ben Affleck and J-Lo. We saw a lot of 2 celeb plus ads.
Agreed. And I think there's a sort of balance there, which is some of the celebrities clearly have been pitched as older references for an older audience.
Yes.
Strategically, it's interesting and probably appropriate, considering the economic situation in America. That makes sense to me. Although I think it alienates a lot of younger audiences that have never seen things like Clueless or Zoolander
Or
even,
Caddyshack.
because they were born in 2000. And so they just don't know any of these things that we're talking about in some sense. I think the challenge is always with celebrities, how can you use it in a way that is distinctive and stands out and not just attempt to, sorry, I've been moving. So the use of celebrities, they have stored attention. They are captured attention devices. They pre-exist and they are famous. They draw attention to things. But that is its own challenge because they're famous for other things than your brand. And when, for example, Serena Williams appears in 2 different alcohol spots in the same ad break, differentiation and distinctiveness become very difficult, I think, to guarantee.
But also, let's just also say she's a fucking queen and we love her getting that brand money.
Sure.
A Black woman as the center of advertising, I think is a great step in the right direction, but agreed for branding. I felt like that was a real challenge. I think though the Pepsi commercial did it well because they use celebrities in this specific way, which is like, we need actors because what we're saying is our product is indistinguishable from the real thing. So we're relying on celebrities who act, aka lie, for a living, to say like, are they lying? Are they not? So that actually made sense for me. Did it have to be Ben Stiller and Steve Martin? I don't think it had to be those two, but I think it made sense, the celebrity play.
There's some intrigue there that makes you sort of vaguely want to try something to see if they're lying. I get that part of it, although it smells strongly of the Crispin campaign for Coke Zero when they fake sued Coke for passing off. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh
yeah.
Anyway.
Just on the Serena point, I think this is also a lesson in where a brand purpose and a celebrity's identity need to harmonize. So when she's in the Mick Ultra spot with the slew of other celebrities, and it's Caddyshack themed, I mean, I thought that was like nails, well executed, and it works. Like I could see her having a Mick Ultra. But I was saying this to Rosie before we hit record. 10 seconds into the Remy Martin spot, I looked at one of my buddies and go, is she fucking marketing whiskey? Like I just can't see that. But I do, +1 to what you said. She's the GOAT. So it's good to see her get that paper. But from the brand perspective, you probably could have chose a different spokesperson that would have more closely associated with what your brand actually is. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I just don't see homegirls sitting around drinking Cavarcier. But I could totally see that whole scene playing with the golf, and it was great.
Well, there's two really important points there. One, which is strategic fit, right? Is it likely this celebrity might actually enjoy this product, which gives a sense of resonance? And there's also the more famous the celebrity, you know, for an example, Naomi Osaka has 14 or 15 different brand partnerships she appears in. That's going to be hard to be distinctive when you have 15 brands all using the same distinctive asset.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because one of the things I noticed this year was obviously the Snoop Dogg with Martha Stewart. And when I first watched it, I was like, wait a minute, they were in our top 5 last year advertising Bit. And then apparently in 2018, they were there for T-Mobile. So it was super important. I mean, I'm fairly sure, to your point that you've just made around using the right brands, I'm fairly sure that they chose Snoop to try and be a bit more cool and a bit more down with the kids. And that's what they were trying to bring to Skechers. And they did a good job of at least featuring the Skechers quite a lot and including the joke when Martha Stewart and they said, get your feet off the table, and there's a visual bit of the Skechers being removed. So, but the point being, the celebrity might get you the attention, but it's not like an owned brand asset that also gets you the branding. So you have to work out how to bring the product in too.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So
and I believe Rosie, wear Skechers.
Keep the mic. What was your overall, like, you're watching the ads, like what was your overall take from last night, and what were some of the themes that you saw beyond celebrities?
Yeah, you know, I think as you said, the celebrity thing was something that we kind of predicted and it was delivered on. I thought we were going to see more get out messaging, go outside, do things. We got a little bit with Bass Pro Shop, a little bit with Bush, a little bit with booking. But I just figured like year 3 of the pandemic, like let's go things and do places. Last year, we saw a lot of travel brands advertising, and that kind of missed this year. Like there was nothing from Airbnb, right? There's nothing from, any of the big players besides booking. I thought we were going to see more humor. That was one of my predictions, and we did. And I think also the humor has shifted. So whereas previously we saw maybe more wit, I felt like this year it was way more absurdist humor.
Yeah, more weird for sure.
More weird shit that looked like
sure.
maybe it would have originated on TikTok and then it went live on the main stage, which I guess we can, dive into too. And then something that I was really hoping for, more representation, less stereotype, relying on, and we can dive into that. I wanted to be overwhelmed by the diversity and representation. This is the biggest stage. So if you're playing in that place, let's do it. I think we still saw some tired stereotypes. I know the Binky spot with the dad, like I reacted to that well at first. I was excited that wasn't just a car driving on a road. And then all the dads in my feed were like, Rosie, come on, that's a lazy stereotype for dads. We don't always lose pacifiers. And if we do, we're not going to lose them twice in one go or forget that same favorite one. I think that was more of a miss than I had hoped. And then less crypto, thank God.
So yeah, but the absence of crypto,
Yeah, seriously, thank God. Go ahead, Faris.
Of crypto was interestingly filled by an extraordinary amount of gambling ads.
Yeah.
which are, functionally the same essential thing they're talking about there.
And last thing on the trend side, I will say too, with the less crypto, we didn't have a real coin-based sort of disruptive ad where, okay, this is the one ad that looks different that everyone's talking about. But because of that ad from last year, we sure as hell had a whole lot of QR codes and scan this call to actions. Like it was madness just how many QR codes there were. I'm also confused why QR codes still look so bad. Like there was a company back in the day called Sticky Bits that made really cute QR codes. So like, why do we have these ugly ass scannable things on screen?
Also, literally the first titanium line awarded at Cannes was for a Japanese company that designed QR codes, because Japan had them for a long time, in the shape of specific features, animals, and so on that still functioned as QR codes. You can do stuff with them, but we have not managed to do that since, apparently.
Faris, it's an interesting thing on the betting. So Kim, for some context, sports betting has not been federally legalized in the US, and similar to cannabis, it's like a state by state dynamic. But what you're seeing here, and it's very unique, I think, to the US, unlike the UK, where services like Paddy Power and others have been a mainstay. There's this new novelty now where a bunch of Americans can whack out their iPhones or their Androids and say, I want to put $5 on how long Chris Stapleton's national anthem was.
Yes, not just propositional betting, which is highly, highly difficult and scary.
Yeah.
Not just simple betting. Now, as you know, in the UK, the incidence of gambling ads going up has interesting effects. Not all of them are super, super positive, is what I would say. But anyway.
It was interesting. And Faris, I'd love to kick it back to you to keep with your reflections. But in 2 of the gambling spots, they were experimenting with using the product to bet. Will Gronk kick the field goal? Which beer is better? And a bit of a live experiential. So that was some good creativity employed there. Whether it worked or not, we'll see in a minute when Kim tells us. But that was interesting. So Faris, what were your kind of overall reactions from the big game and the ads?
So yes, again, QR codes, obviously celebrities for sure. In general, I thought, yes, the humor had shifted tonally slightly to the abstract because everyone's worried about offending people. It felt very conservative. Most of them felt mostly like an idea of Super Bowl ads rather than actually an idea in some senses, which sounds dismissive, but I think is unfortunately the case. I think the one that I remember the most, and this is partially just the way that I think about them and the extensive impact they'll lead to, is the Nike spot, which was actually for a movie, not for Nike at all. I thought the Nike ad, the movie by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon about Nike Air Jordan trainers is probably going to be the most successful spot, but I could be wrong.
I think you're right. I got that text. My wife sent me that spot like a week ago and said, go check your Instagram. I've just sent you this. And I had no idea what it was. And then after watching that, I was like, I really need to see.
And did Nike pay for that movie to be made? Almost certainly they were involved in the production of it. So like, I feel like.
I'm also curious though, one of the things I would be curious on your trends, typically for Super Bowl, we see a lot of brand-based stuff. And it felt like there was a lot of RTB heavy ads. Like there were some brand stuff, but there was a lot of benefit focused advertising in the Super Bowl, which was kind of surprising, right?
True. And also I think partially that there was brands that were trying to launch out of nowhere on that stage. So it was very hard to understand what they did initially. The orange app, Tumi or whatever, the first spot, I just didn't understand what it was supposed to be.
Temu
and
Tubi are two different.
No, Tubi was fine. Temu. Well, that's
Temu is the dress like a billionaire ad that I don't think anybody.
The first one made no sense at all, and then it began to explain what it was about. But I was just like, I didn't.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, and so we and Kim, I'll come to you in a sec. Like, we did this with the UK holiday ads, and I thought the creative that I saw in that flight we were mixing product into the story. But Super Bowl, to me, you're building your brand. It's very much not about like tactical Tuesday advertising. So it does sort of stick out when you're slinging your product at me, and I'm like, no, I'm around I'm sitting with 20 people watching this. This is not the place for this. But yeah, it was sort of almost tacky, like it stood out quite a bit. So Kim, you're watching this from afar, and this is a nice reciprocation because Kim did all the holiday ads, and I have, I mean, I know enough about British culture to be dangerous, but I'm certainly no Brit. So now we get to turn the tables, Kim. So what were your reflections of the Super Bowl ads?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, my reflection from the outside was that they were a bit less Super Bowl-y this year. What I mean by that is in previous years, I haven't necessarily understood them, quirky, like off the wall, lots of culture. Like it's been much harder for me to understand them and to connect emotionally with the ads. And I get that because I'm just not American, right? But this year, I actually got quite a few of them, and I think it's because they played it a bit differently. So I'm reflecting on some of the stuff you said at the beginning. From what we had a rough look at, around 70% had celebs and 70% had humor, right? That's a load.
Even more than last year, 70.
More or less, yeah, quite a lot.
70%.
But what's interesting for me is that particularly in the run up to the Super Bowl, like I was watching them all because obviously I was having to then look up what the programs were, who the celebrities were. It was quite a lot of work. So that was all of last week. And I was like, wow, this is all going to be about the showiness of the Super Bowl. It's all about celebs. It's all about humor. And then on the night, and I'll come on to talk about the top 10, it like flipped it on its head and love went and won the day, right? So forget the celebs. Forget all of the humor, although some like nice lightheartedness, but like love came through, like connectedness, human connection, something that we all need, something that we appreciate, like, and they did so well, which I can come on to talk about.
So I love that emotionally as somebody who wants to believe in humanity and so on. I also think it's just a function of standout. When 70% of people are doing the same exact kind of creative strategy, most of those things will cease to be remembered immediately. That's just the nature of, you know, the clutter functionally in that kind of approach. But
yeah, I think that's like what's great about today's consumer. Their bullshit meter is different to the mass marketing days of the early 90s. And so it's, can you do that authentically? Can you weave a celebrity in authentically? Can you put a claim? Like there's many ads that try to put themselves in a social conversation and they just can't. And so the data, the consumers like that, you know, that we survey, they just call bullshit. And when it's done well, they applaud it and it resonates and it builds the brand.
So it's interesting because I saw some people last night talking about the farmer's dog ad as emotional manipulation. And I kind of pushed that against that because I was like, you know, for me, I would pick a story that makes me feel emotions over some weird abstracted ad pretty much any day. So I like that. And then I kind of threw it back to them. I was like, so is humor emotional manipulation? A brand using humor? Like, is it only when a brand pulls the heartstrings and like makes us cry that we feel like we're being manipulated? I don't know. I thought that was like an interesting thing.
Entertainment tends to be a dismantling function. So entertainment means you sort of, I say things like entertainment is the cost of admission to a human brain. If you can do entertainment, then other stuff will go in alongside it. Otherwise it won't. So you tend to ignore that kind of manipulation. By definition, all advertising is emotional manipulation. That is the primary function of what advertising is designed to do. But if it's too obvious, humans then also will respond to the obviousness. That said, I think in terms of standout and emotional resonance, that is the one that's most being spoken about.
And you're always going to get someone who reacts badly, but I've got some like notes in front of me. Look, it's a little while since I had an A3 piece of paper. That's proper old school, right? Bit of a mind map. But the farmer's dog one that you were just talking about, there might be a few people who felt like that, but in general, like it was incredible. You had people saying things like, it made me cry. Like if something can make you feel that deeply, you're going to do something. It reminds me of my relationship with my dog. People were saying the loving, the cherishing bond. So actually, in general, there's, you know, you might get some of that, but for a lot of people, they loved it.
Yeah, and same. I mean, I also loved it. I don't have a dog. I mean, being nomadic.
Oh, interesting. You don't?
Being nomadic for 10 years prevents us from having pets of any kind. However, I still cried during that ad. I loved it. I want ads that make me feel something. And I think that, you know, I'm curious with the Amazon one too. It's like, we've got dogs in there. Feels like, again, connectedness. We're pushing away from, we're not going to go politically, but we're like, here, what does everyone love? Pets. Our pets, we love those. And after a pandemic year where so many more people got pets, you know, that I think is an even stronger sort of cultural marker. I'm very curious where the cats were though, because presumably like the only cat we saw was YouTube dancing cat for the NFL sports ticket. That was like
keyboard cat.
Yeah. Gen Z tally. We can add that to our that as well. But
I mean,
so I have a cat. I don't have a dog, but my cat behaves like a dog. So if I bounce a bouncy ball, this big fat chub that I've got of a cat, which weighs 8 kilos, by the way, goes flying across the floor and brings the ball back. But I guess for me, it was a relationship with an animal. So whether it was a dog or a cat, it was gorgeous and it was loving. And I'd always want to do the best by my cat. So I can get with that.
So question, do we think, because we all know placement matters, right? Do we feel like because we saw that farmer's dog ad first, that the Amazon ad with the kennel was then less impactful? Because to me, I did feel a little bit of that. I don't downplay that ad. I still think it's great. But in terms of placement, I was kind of like, oh, I already had this huge emotional pull towards farmer's dog. It feels like another pet sort of in your house story that, yeah, it was cute. There was a turnaround. I like that Amazon got their packaging and branding in the spot itself without making it about them, because we know what Amazon does. We don't need that benefit.
I genuinely thought Amazon delivered dogs. I was confused by that, to be honest. I was like, wait, you can order dogs on Amazon?
There were a lot of tweets to that extent as well.
But Rosie's tension is like the same Serena problem, right? Like when we see Serena slinging beer and then Cavassier in the same break, it's like, did we already have our dog, Phil? I think is your question. It's an interesting one.
So, I mean, I didn't watch them in order, but again, what I'll say from a consumer perspective, you can't have too much dog. They were really happy to still have dog. And I guess the bigger piece there was like an extra bit of story that came into the Amazon one, which was not only was there a lovely relationship with the dog and wanting to do the right thing, but people got really emotionally involved because they had this horrible moment, you know, where you talk about taking them on an emotional journey. They had this horrible moment where the dog was doing these things that you wouldn't want them doing in their house. And they thought that the dog was going to be locked in a cage when they were at work all day. And they felt all of the sadness. They went from happiness with this relationship with the dog to utter sadness that it was going to be put in a cage, to a moment of joy when that connection for the dog was the only thing that would make the difference. So it had that extra little twist, which I'm sure probably helped with that journey.
I think so too. I didn't cry. I felt kind of like, I was like, okay, that's cute. And I agree with you, Kim. I like that sort of twist of like, we're all expecting one thing and then it was something else. That was a great payoff.
It's a good point, because we often try and think, what kind of emotions do we want to generate through our communication? And often they tend towards the positive, because usually speaking, positive affiliation, likability, etc., tends to transfer well to preference and so on, right? So making someone happy or whatever makes sense. However, like narratively speaking, you don't have any release unless there's threat. You must have drama for there to be conclusion, right? And so for ads to work as emotional manipulation stories, they have to have threat. They have to have jeopardy or problem to be overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the highest highs come after the lowest lows. And I think so long as your brand's associated with the high you've got at the end, it's brilliant if you've gone on a journey in the meantime. I mean, it's what all the films do. That's
absolutely.
For anyone, George, who's listening.
And it's the right stage for it, because you can assume limited drop off on this particular stage.
Yeah.
Whereas,
they're going to sit, if they're not going to get a drink during that 30 seconds, they're going to stay till the end.
Which is one of the only places where that's likely to be true all the time.
Yeah, it's true. So before we, go ahead, Rosie.
I was just going to say, were those the only 2 ads, our dog ads, that we personally felt like were the heart-wrenching ones this year? I mean, it felt like if we're looking at just like what was trying to do an emotion besides happy, it was the Jesus ads and the 2 dog ads, like of my memory. Everything else seemed to be going towards like, we're trying to be either happy or humorous. And those were the only 2 that were more like or 3, I guess, that were kind of somber, serious-esque, curious.
I think you're right. Did we miss any, Kim?
Not sad or happy. The Disney one we haven't talked about.
The Disney 100 years. So good.
It's not the same kind of thing, but it was still quite emotional. It was nostalgic. It made people feel and relate to different situations, how Disney had brought them. I think one of the things that people talked about is it reminds me of the feelings of Disney, all the sadness, all the happiness, and all the excitement. So like all of the feels that you get from all the Disney movies brought together.
And it's. I mean, I thought the piece was kind of I have lots of money and I'm 100 years old sort of piece to some degree. It didn't say anything, or in my opinion. But what it does quite well is point out that most of other brands have to use borrowed interest cultural IP to leverage those sort of memory structures from the 90s and beyond, right? And Disney doesn't. Disney is like, I own all your imagination. I own Marvel. I own Fox. I own all the stories that are literally hard coded into your brains. So I don't need to go and hire Ferris Bueller. I have all of those things built into my brand system already.
So true.
And you mentioned earlier, how do you relate to all of the different generations? So if you use a celebrity, it might relate to one or the other. The beauty of 100 years worth is that you relate to all of them. Interestingly, no one mentioned it. Was it Paramount? They had the ad that was based on Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Oh, that's right.
It was kind of weird. I found it quite funny though, because to me, like the cliff face made out of his face, he looked like his own bogey, like hanging off his nose, which made me laugh quite a lot. But in terms of generations and relevance, they had his daughters, right, who are like viral successes, and they mentioned Dora the Explorer. Then they had Beavis and Butthead, which I was laughing about at uni 20 years ago, and they had him. So, I mean, not amazing, but they tried to do something that brought like at least relevance from the youngest to the oldest in the audience, that they could relate to something, right?
I think that makes sense.
Guys, the people in our chat want to know the winners.
Okay.
A couple of things before we get into it. We tested all of the ads using the Zappi platform. We did not, we are only showing you what we classified as advertisements. So promos for television shows or movies, we're not going to be showing. We're going to be showing you branded spots. We did test some of those, and so if you're interested, just get at us and we can send it. We are going to show you the top 10 according to a nationally representative audience of American consumers. We tested in the last couple of days on the Zappi platform. We're going to specifically be showing you the winners by a metric called appeal. If people like your advertising, a lot of other things fall in line, and so we're going to focus on that metric, but we did look at a bunch of other things. I want to also say, we did not bias this data. I know that in the United States this morning, the Jesus Knows Us campaign and backing is quite polarizing. We did see that in the data. We did not bias these results because we wanted to represent what actual Americans thought. So the rankings do not reflect any of our own opinions. They're literally the opinions of the American people, which we're going to talk about. The punchline is one of the Jesus ads is in the top 10, so that's why I'm saying that. Without further ado, we'd like to show you the top 10. But before I let Kim take back the mic, I do have to make fun of all of us because we literally were talking about how Snoop Dogg makes people feel young. I think that's just us getting older. Snoop's not young. Anyways,
is he cool though? Is he cool? Is he still cool? No,
I still think Snoop's cool.
I think he's infinitely cool. I think he's like unimpeachably cool. He can do literally anything.
Snoop's the man.
And it never sticks to him. He can do any stupid activity and it's fine.
And Snoop once again is in the top 10. So Kim, without further ado, tell us who the top 10 ads were according to American consumers.
Am I going from 10 to 1 to draw it out?
I think you should build it up a little bit.
All right, I was just checking on this, and not too much commentary because it sounds like people are waiting. So I should get from 10 to 1 and then we can reflect.
Get to 10 to 1 and then we'll all react to you.
That makes sense. Let me get my big piece of paper back because I'm so old school. So number 10, we've got the T-Mobile ad, New Year, New Neighbor. That was the one that was singing along to the Grease soundtrack. At number 9, we have the Jeep ad, the one called Electric Boogie, which is where the electric vehicle was moving around and there was all of these animals like dancing and interacting. Reminded me a little bit of one of the ads from last year, but for a totally different brand. Number 8, the Skechers ad, which is what we were just mentioning. Obviously, Snoop and Martha Stewart in that one. I'm not very good at counting backwards, am I? Number 7,
you're doing great, Kim.
I should have written a number on my piece of paper. Number 7, Popcorners ad, which was the one that was all around Breaking Bad as a theme. Then one we've talked about as well. So we have then got the Base Pro Shops and Kabbalah, which is one that we'd already mentioned. That's number 6. Number 5, one of the Jesus ads, as you've just talked about. So the one Be Childlike. So it was the one where it showed all of these beautiful scenes of kids interacting, sharing love, hugging each other, trying to wipe away tears. So foundationally just based on human connection and caring for those around you. Number 4, don't want to bias it, one of my absolute favorites and was in our top 5 from last year as well, which was Google Pixel. Super clever. I'd love to come on to talk about that one. Number 3, we've talked about a lot. So the Amazon one, Saving Sawyer. So we talked a little bit about the journey on that one. Number 2, Disney 100, which again, we have talked about a little bit in terms of emotion. And number 1, Farmer's Dog, which again, we were just talking about randomly before this. So lots of them, interestingly, like 1, 3, and 5, all grounded in love, which was one of the things that we were mentioning. Then you've got nostalgia. You've got a couple of them that are super clever in how you play on stuff. You've got the zig and zag one, I call it. So the bass pro one, we were mentioning, weren't we? Like when you're in the Super Bowl in this big, loud atmosphere, that instead of being big and loud too, you focus on the quiet beauty of nature. And it, you know, it did something there as well. And then just a little bit of fun and catchiness around the music and animals dancing from the other 2. Reactions, folks, what do we think?
I'm just looking at how many have like animals in them. So we've got like dancing goats on Jeep, and then the Saving Sawyer, Farmer's Dog. I'm interested on that. I'm very surprised that the T-Mobile spot made it in there. I thought the writing was good, but it was a little bit cringe to me as well. And it was so feature forward. Again, it was like all these benefits and things that I was
super product centric.
Yeah, so I'm surprised that that's the biggest surprise to me in the top 10. I would
Agreed,
say.
but like I feel like there's different ways of thinking about how people are using stored attentional cultural devices, right? Grease plus Scrubs, you've covered a couple of audiences pretty well, in my opinion, because the appetite and passion they have for those 2 properties is good, and they used it as a device just to lay out, to your point, product benefits and features, which is fine, but most people ignore that. It'll just feel happy or whatever, right? Whereas, you know, dogs are also universally well known devices for leveraging emotion, especially now. So it's like, it's interesting.
And then I'll also say the surprises were just like my 2 personal faves, the Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to hold with hold music, and Crown Royal, Thank You Canada. Those were the 2 that I really enjoyed myself. So I was kind of surprised that they didn't perform better, especially the Bud Light one. I know we talked about this a little bit before the call. It wasn't that it performed badly, but just that universal insight of dancing on hold music, the TikTok integration where there are people who make dances to hold music. It is pretty funny. And yeah, it just made me have some feel good vibes about Bud Light. I'm just so glad I didn't have to see some Clydesdale horses again, because that's just boring at this point to me. Nothing new happens when those horses come out. So
yeah, I thought it was cute. I thought the specific hold music, which is some sort of TikTok dance phenomena, is an interesting, smart integration choice of channels and cultures. Miles Teller, I think, is maybe not famous enough to get away with what they're trying to do with him, but that's okay.
who is that?
The guy who was playing. The dude is famous, but not really, not very famous.
Yeah, he's like you could probably get him on a cameo for a few $100.
So it's like,
maybe that's good for him then, because if you're not spending big bucks on the celebrity endorsement, you might get a slight raise. But that was one of those ads where, for me, yeah, you didn't need a celebrity. It was well written. It was based on a great insight.
I sort of agree. It's like, I'm not sure he brought much to the. Anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're going to spend the money, then it needs to link to your brand, and then be a big enough name that it's like, oh, I know who that person is, and now I'm listening, and oh, it's cool that your brand is in a conversation with this person.
And this is the advice in general, I think. Like, you can't make a celebrity an ownable brand asset unless you use them for decades and decades. And even then you can't, because they have other clients, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So one of the most important things to do, to your point, is to take what is known about them, play with it, usually invert it in some fashion, and then apply it directly to your brand. Otherwise, it's not connected.
And I think if we go back to the T-Mobile one, it's quite funny because I guess in some ways, without sounding awful, it doesn't seem so sophisticated, right? But, you know, people loved it. Like, it stood out for like someone actually said an abnormal collision of Scrubs universe with the Grease universe, or like the theme, and it made me smile. And then, you know, like catchy tunes. The thing is, like, whatever we think about them, there was some really cheesy ads in the UK like years and years ago, which probably no one else would know, where you used to sing like just one cornetto was like sung, or like you do the shaking back and put the freshness back. I mean, I can't forget that. And it's like 50 years old. Actually, I'm not
So
50, but
I am
nearly.
also extremely passionate about Jingles, and they are extremely underutilized
Mm.
nowadays because they seem cheesy, but they work so extraordinarily
Yeah.
well. I
They
thought
work.
the Uber one, Diddy
Diddy don't do jingles.
attempts to discuss that idea and then make a jingle out of existing pop songs was fine. But I think generally ownable jingles are a very, very useful mnemonic, especially in a world
Agree.
that is mostly screen-based, yes, but is increasingly audio and voice-based.
Audio. Yeah,
So,
spot on.
And we
All
saw
right,
that physical representation with the booking as well. Booking.yeah or booking.com with the Melissa McCarthy. There's that musical element. Anything else where we had music as sort of a big part of it, or jingles? I'd be interested
The
in
Mick
like,
Ultra spots, which was basically riffing on Caddyshack, and I think there was a lot of nostalgia. They were just outside, I think, of the top 10. They were in the top 20. I personally thought those ads were great, but all those celebrities that they used, again, you could see them enjoying a Mick Ultra. Like I could see, I mean, Jimmy Butler was their main spokesperson, and he's been their spokesperson for a long time. So like starting with him, Serena Williams kind of being the hero at the end, and then Tony Romo being Bill Murray was, I thought, hilarious.
so one of the challenges I have is I understand, I think, Kim, you made this point before, picking a variety of different age celebrities makes you appeal to different demographic groups in one very expensive piece, right? But to me, when I saw that, I didn't know who any of those people were.
none of them.
I like not as
None.
like
I mean-
Serena Williams and nobody else that I recognize.
Yeah,
and I was
same.
like, are these famous people, and why? And what does that imply about what they're trying to say? Because I just have no idea who those people are. So that's
Like,
It is
quite
an interesting
representative
convergence,
there.
though. Oh, go ahead,
I think
Rosie.
everyone mentioned Serena.
I know who she
Like
is.
I mean, and everyone knew who she was much more than anyone else. So,
But that's the interesting convergence of the Super Bowl. So if you're so I'm a big sports fan. And so even I can't even remember the offer that YouTube Live was putting on with the cat going nuts. First of all, cats sell, so that was good. But I literally remember being like, oh, I'm going to churn. I have Hulu Live. I was like, I'm going to churn and buy YouTube as soon as that product's available, because it was, and I literally this morning can't remember what the offer was.
Sunday ticket.
Sunday ticket. Thank you. I'm like, oh, I can watch all the football. But it's the same thing in the Mick Ultra spots, because you have the convergence of people who are quite literally there for the ads, Rihanna and Chris Stapleton, and then sports fans all looking at the same spot. And so it'd be interesting at some point for us to cut the data between I'm there for sports versus I'm there for Riri and the ads, and see sort of like the delineation of what people thought.
Really interesting segment.
All right. So Kim, what was your favorite ad?
I think my favorite one was Google Pixel. I'm trying to, everything that I loved about it, like what a great choice of images. So it could have been really dry, but effectively it was like one of the best product demos you'll ever see. The entire ad, a bit like our amazing Christmas ad that we also saw this theme in, right? Do you remember that Lego ad at Christmas? It shows them playing and then it was built. Same kind of theme, an incredible product demo ad, really great choice of images at the beginning. People like loved the little details, like I don't know if anyone else, like the little dog having the crap in the back of the photo, like it was just quite funny before it got wiped out, you know. But I think, you know, we were talking about having something for everyone. It showed animals and how you'd want to get a nice photo with an animal. It showed kids if you happen to have kids. It showed a music concert, someone famous, in case that was your lifestyle rather than kids or animals. It showed you scrubbing out your ex. So if you're going through that emotional stage of life where you want to get your ex out the way, it felt to me like it was a really careful choice of images. Yeah, everything was like, it was so relevant. It was really clear what the pain point was. It was so obvious why you'd want to be able to fix your pictures. And then there was also like beautiful storytelling. The music at the beginning was like quite slow and you moved into it. And then when they brought in the solution to the pain point, there was literally like a step up in rhythm, a step change in the music. They showed the solution. They left people feeling on a high, like, yeah, really effective product demo. And people, there was something for everyone. They loved it. And I just thought it was super smart.
And just out of interest, do you think Google uses the pixel advertising to sell pixels? or do you think it uses the
Feel
Google
good
app?
about Google.
Because they don't make a lot of pixels. They make very, very few pixels. They actively throttle supply of pixels because obviously they don't want to compete directly with their other Android partners. So it's like, it's sort of it's a Google brand spot that looks like a pixel spot, kind of, right?
It's a really good point.
Right? Like I thought it was Apple for the first.
Oh, I 100%.
The whole app. I thought it was
100%.
Apple. I thought it was Apple the entire way
100%.
until the end, which I think would be interesting on like recall. Because if I had walked away, I would have been like, cool, the Apple ad. I know like on Apple, my sister was showing me how you can like isolate different people. So I was like, oh, I've already seen this on my iPhone. I know exactly what they're talking about. I thought it was great, but like I did not think it was pixel at all. Now that surprise could work for them. I think also though, like in terms of strategy, like we know shot on an iPhone worked pretty well for Apple. So it feels like Google was like, hey, like
We need one of those.
We need one of those. Can we do that? Like, let's do, we've got a better camera, guys. Like people love Apple, but like we all know that the Google Pixel camera is better, even though I'm never going to buy a Google phone in my life. So like I thought that was also.
But they did fixed on pixel. Whilst the use case is very, very specific as opposed to shot on iPhone, at least sounds pretty good.
I know, and it does kind of jab at Apple of like, if you shot this on an iPhone, we can fix it on the Pixel.
Yeah.
If that's what they were going for, I don't know.
It's interesting. Also, the Apple stuff about, I don't think it's in this, but like, you can edit your text now.
Yes.
It feels
Yeah,
like
I saw that spot. That was cool.
The movement towards kind of like accepting we make mistakes and trying to, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Like you don't want, I don't know, there's something about that.
All right. So Faris, what was your favorite ad?
So the way I think about these things is often in memorability terms, but also into kind of extension terms. And I know this doesn't count, but I can't help it. I think the Nike spot.
Oh yeah, you said, yeah.
Which is directed by Matt Damon or Ben Affleck as a movie about Air Jordans is an unbelievable ad for what will be also an unbelievable ad for Nike.
Can we talk just for a second about our trailers ads? Because I think that's something that we have to think about when you are a brand competing on the Super Bowl placement, ad placement. The stories that tend to stand out most are the ones that Hollywood have spent millions and billions of dollars on. And they do this repeatedly. Studios just churn out movies. So in terms of like looking at those, I mean, I'm not talking about a promo for The Masked Singer. I'm talking about the actual like trailers for movies. This is an art and storytelling. These are the commercials, quote unquote, that drive emotion. Is it an ad? To me, if you are just making a trailer for a movie, I mean, then you're putting it on the Super Bowl placement. You bought that media time. That is an ad in some capacity.
For sure.
So it is.
They've just got a bit of it. They've got a bit of a leg up, haven't they? They've already got a story that effectively has been told, that they're cutting back, creating the intrigue around it, showing all this stuff. I can tell you, Faris, by the way, that did do very well. So it would have gone in the top 10. You'd be happy to know. It makes sense.
Well, that's to Rosie's point. They are competing. So if we had to cut them out of the data because the top 10 would have been really good movie promos, and that's a message to advertising teams.
Yes.
If you're using tentpole moments, you are competing with the best entertainment on the TV that night, period. Not Coke versus Pepsi or P&G versus Unilever. And Faris said this in the pre-show, like that will be the most successful ad most likely, because you better believe I'm going to see that movie as soon as I possibly can. I can't. And as much as I like the creativity of the Google Pixel, sorry, I'm not switching. Like I'm an iPhone guy. It's not happening for Google.
I guess my only question is, I wonder how much Nike was involved in that movie and how much they paid for it and or etc. Because I think that would make it even more interesting to me. Did Ben Affleck go, I just really want to write a film about, Air Force Ones or not,
Yeah. And I really want to see that movie now. I didn't even know it was coming out. So I loved that because I suddenly thought, I need to see that. And obviously on Saturday night, there was my kid as well, just basically his birthday's coming up in April, and needless to say, he wants some new Air Force trainers. So, it's all connected in.
It worked.
And like if you're trying to reach advertisers and there's a movie about advertising, I mean, like in the industry, right? There's a lot of people paying attention to advertising on the Super Bowl. Feels like a Phil Knight spot and something about advertising the story of brands. Like if you're going to do it, that seems like a great stage to advertise.
Such a good point, Rose.
Yeah.
That's where award shortage.
Such a good point, though, because like Ryan, to your point, like, you know, Nielsen last reported this in 2010, but half the people who watch the game watch for the ads and half watch for the game, roughly, the last time it was studied. So you're right, there's two very distinct audiences and half of them are ad interested people by definition. That's
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I'll round out the winners and then we can pick a few scabs before we let everybody go. For those people still with us, I have no clue who's with us and who's not, but I appreciate y'all. For those listening later, we appreciate you too. So an ad that we didn't talk about is actually my son Declan's favorite ad. For those of you who don't know my son Declan, he sits in the back of my Jeep Wrangler and decodes ads on the radio for fun, which is a weird thing for a 7-year-old to do. So I was asking him for his opinion. He has school, so he couldn't join us. And it was Bass Pro Shops. And I agree with him on Bass Pro Shops because it was the one ad, to Rosie's point, that brought in product while building brand. They took you through the experience that their brand gives through that spot. For those of you who've ever been to a Bass Pro Shop, it's a freaking day. Like it's an experience, it's a journey. And I thought it was I remember when that spot first came on, I go, oh my God, that's Bass Pro Shops. And then my second thought was, I can't believe they're advertising on the Super Bowl. And then at the end, I was like, this is really good. Like I thought they really thread that needle well of like, let's face it, they want to get that brand bigger so they can put more stores around the country and get more people going through the doors on the website. That's all they're trying to do. And I thought they thread the needle really nicely. I want to talk about one quickly before I pause, since I have the microphone, that didn't get in the top 10, and it was TurboTax. And the reason I want to talk about TurboTax is that was like a slow and steady campaign to me, where they had the creative territory 6 months ago and they've been building towards it. And they brought out, probably not relative to other Super Bowl ads, a really funny story to arc that campaign right at a time where people are thinking about going to do their taxes. And so as somebody who appreciates consistency in marketing and integration in campaigns, I thought that they did a really nice job there, even though the breakthrough of it relative to the other Super Bowl spots, were they even in the top 20? I don't think they were even in the top 20.
No.
But I personally geeked out and enjoyed that.
Brian, I'm going to have to do a hot take here, which is like reflecting on what you said earlier of consumers have a higher bullshit meter. And I'm sorry, but there is no way I am cheering for TurboTax or H&R Block, who spend quite literally millions of dollars a year lobbying to make sure that Americans will have to continue paying for their taxes. They say they're trying to help you, and they are literally doing the opposite at every single stage, every single chance they can.
Probably why?
Why? Because then the business model continues to
No, that's probably why people saw right through it. I think you're right.
I think exactly that. I think it's got to a point where the discourse around taxation has become interesting, and they are the principal reason that Americans are forced to file taxes every year, because it causes them to have a business. Because they literally lobby to the point where the IRS is not legally allowed to make a free option available to people.
We gotta go. I want to look at these open ends. I bet Rosie and Faris are right.
I mean, so I'm just saying with that was an example for me of, it doesn't really matter what you do until you take an action that redeems your former actions or hooks a step in the right direction. I tried to call out anyone who said the TurboTax ad is great. I'm like, reminder, here's the ProPublica article just telling you how shitty of a company they actually are. Oh, H&R Block, same thing. So I'm going to be a advertising vigilante on this one. And anytime I hear TurboTax and H&R Block, like,
look,
go girl, I like it.
Brand is created in the totality of experience, right? And we live in a very transparent world where the actions of companies, the utterances of employees, the way they treat people, pay taxes, and so on, are communicated endlessly as long and underneath the advertising they wish to put out into the world. So how you act is functionally as important as what you say, if not potentially more important. Yeah. Because if there's dissonance there, people begin to notice.
Which is why I think one of the ads that I enjoyed that maybe could have been a little bit better, though, was that GM ad, giving the electric vehicles the stage they deserve. Felt like a great tagline to me. And they have this ongoing mission where they literally are working with Netflix to put more EVs into shows because, again, representation matters, and a rising tide floats all boats. So I'm sure for GM, they're great. If more people buy electric vehicles overall, more people buy theirs. They want to be all electric. In the past, I thought that was one of those things where it's like, okay, this was a great idea. It was a little confusing until I went to the website and started diving into what they were actually doing. But like that was a great example of it, brand taking an action and then making an ad about the action they are taking in the world. Again, I don't know if it wasn't my top favorite, but I liked that as an idea rather than just another interactive experiment that we filmed one thing once and we do it. This is
like the Pizza Hut thing where it was clearly like, we made a big ass pizza and threw it all away.
It said the world's biggest pizza, and then the asterisk at the bottom said, not the world's biggest pizza, though. Our lawyers made us say that. And I'm like, don't say it then.
And why not just, if you're going to make the biggest pizza, like maybe just make the biggest pizza. Like you.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So we only have 10 minutes left and I want to pick on a few, but before I do, I want to give a shout out to PepsiCo. They're dominated the top 20 as usual across their brands. They're full disclosure, a very big customer of ours, but I always like to see our customers win. I also wanted to have two more conversations. The first one is, it's well known that people consume things with multiple devices.
Mm-hmm.
And Rosie picked up on this when we were emailing pre-show. Not a lot of brands did it. So we had avocados, I think, and then the Ben Stiller during the ad breaks pouring soda on himself, which was the kids really got a kick out of it. But why do you think brands stop doing that? It's not like consumer behaviors changed. People still have their phones out and their iPads or whatever else.
I think, I hope at least, as having gotten to work with Oreo when I was at 360i, and our team tweeted, you can still dunk in the dark, and it was the birth of real-time marketing. And then we saw so many brands commenting on loads of things that we just really didn't care about, really seemed unnecessary and just adding to this cluttered marketplace. And I think now there's that shift to right time marketing and saying, we don't need to comment on a football play just for the sake of doing it. Let's actually save that sort of real-time marketing for when there is a relevant thing for our brands. I liked the avocados from Mexico because they were watching, or they tweeted about the farmer's dog spot, and they were like, oh, we're just cutting onions over here, watching the spot, for guac, something to like, I'm not remembering.
I think Booking.com did a similar thing where they responded to every commercial and made comments on each commercial, which is fun.
Avocado cutting onions, farmer's dog. I'm like, okay, that tied it together for me. You're complimenting someone else, but nothing that really like was culturally, oh my gosh, the one tweet that everyone saw or the brand that was playing in the digital space.
There was definitely a few promotions that I think pulled the thing down, but I didn't notice a lot of social activity that was mentioned during the actual spots, which I guess is the point of having that kind of call to action. So
the other prediction that we had going into the weekend, and it's, I would say, more than a prediction. Zappi platform hosts a lot of big brands creating ads, and inclusivity is a metric, a benchmark, a question. Are we moving the needle that most CMOs have today? But as Rosie said at the beginning of the podcast, it was a lot of old school stereotypes and not a lot of genuine innovation on this space. Why do we think that happened, folks?
Can I wait before we do that? I want to share two other examples of that. One was just VMS. We had a representation of menopause on the Super Bowl ad. I think it was a huge miss and very confusing, but that was some representation. The other thing that we saw was with the NFL ad for flag football, which featured a Hispanic woman. America is filled with 63 million Hispanics, I think, something to that number. So I was surprised that we only saw that representation there. She actually spoke Spanish in that ad. So I do think there were a couple of things that pointed towards that, but yes. Okay.
And that NFL spot was very good. Very well done, very authentic. I thought they did a good job. Go ahead, Faris.
Is flag football a kind of thing? Is that a new kind of sport?
Yeah, and it's a great thing for the NFL to push because, if you've won 2 Super Bowls already, maybe get out while your brain is still intact.
That's violent. Yeah.
Maybe
that's what it is, because most parents aren't letting their kids whack each other in the head anymore, myself included. And so flag football is much bigger,
I think generally this year we're either in a recession or about to go into one, because everyone thinks we're going into one, which is functionally the same thing in Keynesian mechanic terms. It creates a great deal of uncertainty and instability, which creates a degree of conservatism, right? You don't feel super comfortable doing risky stuff when you know that advertising and marketing budgets tend to be the most discretionary inside corporations, and they're often the ones that turned off first. So this being the beginning of the year, before things really kick in my opinion, you need to demonstrate this expenditure had effect. It will be very, very, very important for people to demonstrate that this moves some very serious commercial needles. And so I think that leads to tried and tested formulas or promotional mechanics that might help with that, because they are concerned about what's coming, I think.
It is a shame to me that when P&Ls get squeezed, marketing departments resort back to covering their ass as opposed to doing good work. And I get it. I understand why attribution and driving sales becomes more important than doing good work to build a brand in the long term. And so it's a balancing act I think most CMOs are struggling with this year. You're absolutely right.
Agreed. It's the biggest single problem we have faced for a long time, fragmentation and short versus long. We need ways to measure more accurately the efficacy, the performance of what's not called performance media, although the term performance media is misleading because you buy it based on clicks, not based on it performing commercially for you, but it's a very good piece of confusing branding that industry created. Measuring the other side of the equation in exactly as commercial granular a way is very difficult, but something we're going to have to try and work out. Otherwise, this will keep happening.
I think there's something interesting anyway about the Super Bowl this year and uncertainty and everything we're talking about, because when uncertainty is there and people feel uncomfortable, they rely on shared culture and coming together, a bit more togetherness, and the importance of that. And for me, the really interesting thing about the Super Bowl, and I think this is why quite a lot of the ads use quite old films, is there is a bit of a question mark in my head with fragmentation. Have we got less and less shared culture and less shared moments to draw upon? I don't know. And is like the Super Bowl is a brilliant moment, because even if your ad wasn't the best, you've got stature from coming on that platform and being seen. You're part of that shared culture moment, and there's not that many of those moments left, I think, in society now. Because in the old days, when you said, oh, did you watch this, blah, oh no, sorry, I was watching mine on Amazon, I was watching on Netflix, I was watching on whatever. But loads of people are watching the Super Bowl, and I think there's something super powerful in that. Your
analysis is exactly correct, in my opinion. Culture fragmented alongside media fragmentation. So what famous used to mean in a limited bandwidth experience world is most people reasonably know what this thing is. Famous now means a distinct population may know what something is, and it'll be invisible to anybody out of that distinct population because media is so fragmented, which means at these moments of huge, you've got to try and find things that people already know from before things fragmented. So you use cultural attention devices, be it media or celebrities, that you can reasonably expect most people will maybe know, and then draw it down with some individual ones. But yes, that is the big challenge, and why nostalgia has been so common in the last few years in advertising, because building that level of common knowledge now is extremely hard. Although Farmer's Dogs arguably did it, so you know.
Well, so I want to round off this with maybe one or two that missed, but Farmer's Dog, a brand I think none of us on this podcast knew who they were. I own 2 dogs.
I worked on pet food brands. Like back in the day, Iams was one of my clients. Fresh Pet, I think, was the original sort of Farmer's Dog brand of like real human grade food that is refrigerated. But yeah, even with that sort of brand context, I had never heard of them before.
And they were the top performing Super Bowl ad according to American consumers. So congratulations to Farmer's Dog. I will be hitting up your website and seeing if I can feed my pups. And congratulations to everybody in the top 10, to all the advertisers. I hope that your brand grows and that you see a lot of traction on your websites and in your stores today, because I know all the work that went into it. But every year there's an ad that you sit there and go, why? And for me this year, it was Temu. First of all, never heard of the brand. Second of all, it was very poorly produced, in my opinion. It was trying to be a discount retailer and give me this feeling of premium. And I left the ad feeling as though I was like watching an anime cartoon. Like, what the fuck just happened? To me, that one took the cake of like this year's, why are you doing this? And I get it. Mass market, it's the same reason always. Mass audience, I can put a lot of eyeballs on my brand, that will help me. but the difference between Farmer's Dog and how they built equity in the moment, even though we had none with them, and Temu was like both ends of the spectrum fully. I don't know if you guys had any others, but to me that one, and I think they had 3 or 4 flights. So it was like, it got more painful as the game went on for me to watch that one.
Maybe it was. Oh wait.
Oh, we had an malfunction. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
You can still hear it's fine. Well, yeah. So I think the first spot, I just didn't understand what it was. I couldn't really like get it. Essentially, I was like, "Do you sell wigs as well? Is it a cheap wig shop?" Because there was a big wig scene where they have these different price wigs, and I was like, "I don't get it." It did make it clearer with repetition what the kind of product might be, but I agree, it looked. The line billionaire and the general feeling of cheapness did not seem to align super well, although I understood what they were trying to indicate, that you will feel rich when you can buy many, many cheap things. But
yeah, exactly. Oh,
yeah, I thought it was a miss. And I mean, I'm not going to be rooting for fast fashion really at any point. I definitely not when the ad was that painful to be a part of. Have to witness.
Folks, thank you for listening. Rosie, Faris, Kim, Kelsey, and to everybody behind the scenes at Zappi who tested all the ads, to all the consumers who tested them, thank you. Congrats to the top 10. We will be releasing.
I would say congrats to all of the people who had Super Bowl spots out there, because we all know just how hard it is to work on these really big campaigns. And you're dealing with, big budgets. Yes, you get that, but there's still a lot that goes into it. So just hats off to every advertiser and strategist and creative and producer and account management team that helped bring these to life for our enjoyment and critiques.
It's the world's biggest stage. It is inherently terrifying. And it's great. You did it.
You did it. And I hope after you go through your board meetings today with all the results, you take a few days off to relax, because you deserve it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Rosie, Faris, Kim, Kelsey, thank you. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.